Are we live on Facebook? Just because it's appeared live on Facebook on my screen. I don't know if it's true.
I think we are going live.
We are live. Okay. We are now officially live.
Okay.
And I would like to ask Ludovico to start for the cross-posting.
Yeah.
And I would like to ask to Alberto if you can share also the link in the group, or I will try. I can try too.
See. You mean the Facebook link or the Zoom link?
The Facebook one.
Okay, perfect.
I'm still admitting people from Italy in this case, activists from other territories. Okay. We have Michele too, that is our international secretary.
Hi, everybody.
Okay. Okay. Okay, maybe we can start if you would like to do it. Okay.
Hi.
Okay, hello everyone. We are starting. So thank you, Caterina, first of all, for this opportunity of moderating such an outstanding panel. Let me introduce myself. I'm Giulia Covelli, bureau member of both GD and YES. Now the guests are all friends of GD Italy, of course. We had the chance to appreciate in these years. You are all invited to give us your contribution, your vision on the themes we decided to focus our discussion on. And of course, now Alberto and I are going to give you a sort of oversight of what we are going to talk about today. Of course, everything changed in a world after the COVID. I'm talking about the international relations scenario. We had, of course, this superpower of the US that is still going on, it's keeping on fading. But at the same time, even what it seemed to be the unstoppable rising of China suddenly stopped. Then we had a very important news concerning the European Union. Here we have today many European friends we work every day to build a stronger European integration with. And the thing that challenged our system was a new sort of new investments on social pillar, and of course also on social policies. They were so important to strengthening the European Union and our singular states in improving our response to the virus. Finally, a thing we wanted to share with you and to talk about with you is the necessary medical cooperation that we are going to build in the next month to face crisis. Now, Alberto, if you
thank you very much to Caterina and Giulia. I'm Alberto. I'm the international officer of GD Lombardy. And I just want to say that this emergency made us conscious of the importance of global politics and the impact of this frame, let's say, on local policies. The American urbanist Neil Brenner actually defined about 10, 15 years a clear link between these two dimensions, and also the effects on politics and the economics of this connection, which defines also a scenario where parts of global cities in the world are more connected than, for instance, downtowns and suburbs in the same city. So to some extent, this picture there is a great debate nowadays on what is the future of climate change and the sustainable perspective of the world. And so many scientists and philosophers affirm that coronavirus wouldn't have been possible in a society without any intensive breeding production, which has actually direct consequences on our health and on the global pollution. So what's the future of COP21 agreement, and what about the UN SDGs, and in particular, what about the Green New Deal? International cooperation focus on sustainable development may represent today a way to achieve more results in this perspective, but I'm sure that the European Commission and the Green New Deal in particular, launched by Ursula von der Leyen, and who is, as you know, the president of the EC in a majority composed also by us as a socialist. So what will be the impact of this New Deal in making the difference? And I really believe that through our job also as young European socialists, we can make Europe as an example of a new vision of the world. And another topic that I'd like to remark and ask to the speaker, it's their opinion on the impact of global civil movements on our society, like Demosisto in Hong Kong, Fridays for Future from Sweden, and Black Lives Matter from the US. Because I actually have the impression that these movements are like kind of temporary, and they actually clearly represent the fact that political parties have a problem of representation, and more in detail, they have some strong difficulties to tackle main problems of people's life in the agenda, such as racism, such as job, freedom, civil rights, climate rights, and so on. And last but not least, there is another important issue that, of course, is more European, but still international because of our international dimension as Europeans. That is shaping the conference of the future of the European Union in this COVID period. And as you know, the EC relaunched this big project when the President von der Leyen became President of the Commission, and through youth councils in each member state, we are going to organize events for promoting the European feeling. But I'm not sure about the effect on that this project may have on the European citizens. So I'm also asking what's your opinion on, and I also suggest that our organizations as socialists could make some effort to drive this project with a strong federalist impact. So I'm going to introduce the first speaker. Brando Benifei is the head of Partito Democratico delegation in the European Parliament, and he's really a GD friend, so I'm really proud that he's here with us. And you have the floor, Brando.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for inviting me and my colleague Evin Incir for this debate. She will join later. We are both, me and Evin, two MEPs who are veterans of YES and IUSY. She has been a IUSY Secretary General. I've been a YES Vice President for 2 mandates, and I've been also chairing the last IUSY Congress. So I've been well involved even recently in the youth movements, the international, both European and world ones. And I'm very happy that I have this occasion to give a little contribution together with my colleague Evin, who will join later. Both of us, as I said, are now members of the European Parliament in a very peculiar moment. In fact, just a few months after we approved we confirmed the new European Commission, this whole new challenge of the COVID has taken over the whole agenda of the European Union. We were working, as Alberto was correctly recalling, on the Green Deal and on the digital transformations as two big areas of work for us. The European Union is trying to pave the way on, for example, on the regulation of robotics, of artificial intelligence, and we have been working on that, thinking that we would have a 2020 very different from what has actually happened, because, as you know, in a few months we have been thrown into this challenge that was not just European, not just for us, but a world one that is not won already. And what I would like to send as a message, and that's why it's so important that the Yes and IUSY and the movements all over the world of young progressives and left-wingers that work together, is that we cannot just go back to the old status quo. Even when we say, as I say and many say, that we need to rebuild a more multilateral world, a world that is less divided and is able to find solutions together. We are not saying the whole thing, because the old multilateralism is not going to, the broken one, but still there it's not going to come back as it was, and probably it's not even something desirable. We probably need to build a new world order, a new world balance for the post-COVID world. And I think that one very important thing is that we work on a human rights driven and value-based international order as much as we can. And just also the movements that were mentioned earlier can be important examples of that. And we know now, I mean, with the movements that we work with, when we think at the IUSY framework, we think of Africa, we think of South America, we think of Southeast Asia, of Oceania, of the Middle East, China, and the US generally. I mean, yes, there are the young democratic socialists of America, but that's, I mean, a small thing. They are out of this framework, but it's something that I think should question us. Can we build a world based on a new multilateralism, starting from our drive for social justice, for democracy? I think yes, because today we have organizations, and we have especially states that are driven by different models, not democratic ones, of models that are they are one-party states, or we have a more and more regressing social model, as we have seen in the US. The US as a democracy like the European ones and the others, but a place where it's not, we didn't need the COVID to know that you could die for asthma in the streets or for diabetes without having a proper healthcare, even if that's a very rich country, because other places in the world, they don't have that because they are poorer. But in that case, we have a society that is rich, but it leaves behind a lot of people. So in this idea of building a model of political freedom and of a stronger social model that is inclusive of people, of all the different needs of society, is something that I think we could try to build as much as possible with the regional differences as something that could be worth fighting for. I know very well how much the movements also here today from South America, for example, have been fighting for a stronger social model and for democracy. That's the same for our African comrades, and that's the same for the comrades from all the other parts of the world. I think we cannot avoid to mention in these hours the struggle that is going to be there close for sure to Europe, from which I'm connected. That's the annexation going on in Palestine, that we know that there will be this decision and the action to take it to annex the Palestinian West Bank to the state of Israel, and that's one of those situations where we know very well how much we are engaged as a global progressive movement, and especially you as a youth movement that has been always working for peace and understanding. So in this very complex context, I think we need to try to work together to build some common initiatives at the global level. Europe can help by strengthening its regional integration and becoming a stronger voice, more united, as it is not today at the level that is needed. And I think we should promote regional integration in the rest of the world in obviously a direction of democracy and human rights and social rights. I think that fighting against climate change must be a common fight. The fight against global tax fraud and the global tax evasion against people is something that must unite us, because it needs an action that is against certain situations inside some states, but it's also against the uncontrolled power of multinationals and of a financial system where the freedom of movement of financial of capital is not coped with enough control by the democratic institutions, also at the supranational level. So we need to rebuild the United Nations. They are so weak today, and they need a renewed drive. We need probably to rebuild them. They are now very, very weak in many aspects. We have to take what is working, but also reform what is not working. And I think we have to build a common alliance against poverty, a global alliance, first of all by canceling the, after this crisis, we have seen how it can be unsustainable to have long due, very old debts accumulated in poorer countries that will never be repaired. I've signed with hundreds of legislators a letter to the World Bank and to the IMF recently, talking exactly about this. We cannot just have the suspension of the interests. That was the G20 already decided, but we need to go further in debt relief. And probably this is more a European issue. We will need to build not just common instruments for the recovery of the economy, but also stronger instruments for burden sharing. As you have seen, I didn't talk too much about the European things. I just touched them briefly because I always talk about that. But I wanted to talk more about the global perspective because of what we are dealing with today. Because I think, and I want to conclude on this, I hope this contribution was useful to start some thinking, some trails of your discussion. Because I think that on all these fights, Europe must play an important role. The European Parliament is the one that can drive some positive change more than governments that are very much attached to short-termism on electoral perspectives. They are very much unable to look at the medium term, while the European Commission and the European Parliament, we did their 5-year term, they have a more long-term view. In other places, this long-term view is substituted by simply not having a democracy. But I think we should still try with democracy. But we need to be able to plan with more ambition. And this is not something that today the European nation state is able to do in this world context, where authoritarianism and destruction of social models is on the verge, and also new conflicts are coming up. And so we need, I think, that's our part. I think as Europeans, we need to build a better, a way to, I think there is an open mic, okay? It's a way I think also to think of a possible model of progressive regional integration, that I think it's a crucial global issue. We need more regional integration in the world, at least this is my opinion, to build a more peaceful and more understanding world where people can understand more each other, and maybe pursue, that's up to us to fight for that, more progressive causes like the ones I mentioned regarding climate, regarding democracy, regarding human rights, regarding the peace and justice at a global level. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and I hope I gave some useful contributions for your discussion, and always viva GD, viva IUSY, viva yes. Bye bye.
Thank you so much, Brando, for such an interesting insight. Indeed, our mother party in Italy is having a deep discussion about reshaping multilateralism after COVID. At the same time, what a challenge this is for the European Union, and what a responsibility lies on the shoulders of the Conference on the Future of Europe. Before going on in our debate, I would love to introduce another person, because we wouldn't be here today without the strong commitment of a person that is, for me, a friend and a comrade, Caterina Cerroni, UC Vice President. So Caterina, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Julia, also for the introduction of the panel discussion. And I'm really glad to have you here all in this call. I think we don't have enough opportunity during this period to meet each other, to discuss and work together. This year is a very weird year. We don't have international summer camp, and it's a missed opportunity to work together and to discuss and to spend time together. So I think it's more and more important to continue discussing also on the digital platforms, and to debate with each other about what will be the world after COVID from a social democratic perspective. I really would like to thank all the international comrades that are here. I'd like to thank Anna, our Secretary General of YES and IUSY, and Friso, Bruno, and all the Rodrigo I see is now connected, and really all the international comrades that make once again IUSY and YES and our sister organization close to GD Italy. I want to thank all the GD members and activists and leaders that are connected today with us, and really thank you for the opportunity to discuss these issues. Brando was already talking about many issues that are related from European Union, and also to the world and how it's changing right now. I think that if we look at world, we should consider that the pandemic crisis is still not ended in many countries. We have here connected some comrades from South America, and I'd like to show them all our solidarity for the situation they are facing right now, that is very difficult, and that in a sense it's passed from Italy in the last month. And the pandemic is not the only risk we are facing right now. There is intolerance, poverty, violence against women, that are all phenomena that are increasing during the lockdown and after the lockdown. And it's something we have to face. You were talking about the new movements since Fridays for Futures to Black Lives Matter, to the feminist movements that are increasing around the world. And I think we should give them a political answer, and our parties should give them political answers. And what about the European Union in these scenarios? You mentioned many issues about European policies in this period. I think the conference on the future of Europe, it's something that as citizens and as political activists, we should face with a lot of energy and a lot of interactions between member organizations. I think that the most advanced point of integration that the European Union has reached in the last European Commission mandate was the public consultation of European citizens that brought the Juncker Commission to the 5 pillars, and especially to the social rights pillar. And this tells us, I think, that the role of citizens and of youth organizations should be really clearer to reach more integration and to reach a more equal integration in this period. We are observing the SURE program, Next Generation EU, and the discussion about recovery fund, and we worked with the YES and USY on the proposal of Eurobonds. And I think this discussion is something very new inside the European Union and something we should focus on, and that gives us hope. And I think this is the moment to push this direction inside the EU to have a better future for a new generation inside the European Union. And on that, we are from Italy, so I'm sure more comrades from Italy will focus on healthcare system, but also integration of healthcare systems and on scientific and medical cooperation is something really important for the future of Europe and also for the future of the world. So thank you really again for being here to discuss and share opinions, because if we have the opportunity and I think also we must push a more integrated Europe and a more fair world. Now we have the opportunity to do it, and I'm sure we need to do it together.
Thank you so much, Caterina. Now we are going to listen to our international speakers and guests, and we are going to do it in a round of 5 minutes long speeches. And we start with Anna Pirskalava, who is the Secretary General of both YES and USY. She's a friend of GD Italy, and we are so glad to be cooperating with you, Anna, on so many fields. You have the floor.
Hello, everyone. Julia, thanks a lot for inviting me to this very interesting panel. And I think also what Brando said, it's very important that yes, we are discussing European level politics and what's happening and how can we address these issues on European level. But at the same time, I'm very happy that you invited as well international speakers, including me, to speak about more global approach and perspective, because if we are looking at the issues that has been at the table in last few years, we see that they are global issues. For example, when we speak about the environmental issues, they are global. We have to address them on a global level, otherwise it really will not have any, we will not be successful in it. And the racism as well, it's not happening only in certain countries, but it's a problem that is everywhere and needs to be addressed on a global level as well. And of course, Corona crisis as well. It's a lot of countries that are having very different effects from the crisis, and it's important to see the perspective of other continents and how they are dealing with it. And at the same time, when, like, for example, a couple of hours ago, we had a live discussion again in USY. It was about the social movements and the women's role in those movements. And we on a certain way already addressed the issues that has been questioned by you. that why it is a bit unable for our movements, our parties, to gather all those issue-based politics that we are seeing in different movements. Because, for example, in a couple of years or even century ago, it was always the socialists, social democrats, labor parties who were kind of, or other big parties who were kind of covering big issues. But now we see a lot of different issue-based groups protesting, and we kind of need to analyze it, why it's happening and why our organizations or movements are a bit unable to accommodate their interests and their needs. So it's always good to reflect on those issues when we are gathering and discussing. You also asked me to talk about like social movements and how the corona crisis will affect it or will affect to us as a global movement. If we look at the last year till all this began, we see that it has been the year with most protests all around the world. There have been a lot of numerous protests going in a lot of countries that were very important and that really pushed a lot of, could push a lot of democratic changes. But unfortunately, due to these lockdowns, it got cut. And it also created a fertile ground to authoritarian and undemocratic leaders from all over the world to take over those spaces and to misuse their power, increased power in this lockdown states. We have seen it in Europe. We have seen how Orban misused his power and started to adopt undemocratic bills while lockdown regime. We have seen it in other parts of the world. We have seen how it's undemocratic regimes like in Russia and China are misusing the technology as well, that they are creating the apps that can steal the data and track the people. They also are misusing this facial recognition issues. So I'm really afraid what's going to happen after the crisis is over, because this misuse of data and the new realities will really affect every one of us. But here also comes our role, that we need to be, we as a socialist and social democrats need to be ready for the situation. We also need to adapt to new realities. And if you see how we are doing in the youth movements, both in YES and USY, we are trying our best to use online tools to organize ourselves. Also, we in the future, we are looking for the hybrid activities, if that will be possible at all. So we have to think outside of the box and the traditional tools to organize ourselves. But of course, at the end, I always think that the physical gatherings or manifestations and protests and the headaches they can give to people who are in the decision making and who really can change things is of course crucial. And I really hope that soon we will also go back to that. But meanwhile, I'm very happy to see all of you in these online platforms and discussions, and to talk more about our role in it. So thanks a lot again for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Anna. The next speaker is a friend. He's one of the vice president of YES, and he's also the international secretary of Young Socialisten in the Netherlands. And he's studying diplomacy, and he used to deal with international relations and affairs. So it's quite an important topic for us today for our conversation, as Katerina said before. So I'm gonna present Friso Ages, and I would like to ask him in particular how to tackle this biggest issue that we mentioned before, and how to make a stronger Europe in a way that protects also our future as new young generations. You have the floor, Friso.
Thank you, and it's really nice that I can be here, that you invited me to speak. First, one thing about what you said, I'm no longer the international secretary of the Dutch Young Socialists. I was it last year, but not this year anymore. We have a very good new one. But yes, I'm vice president at YES, and I'm responsible for social and economic affairs. It's really an honor for me to be here, especially that you invite me, a Dutch person, still to an Italian event. Quite some things have happened, of course, the previous months regarding this relationship between the Netherlands and Italy. I was really ashamed of the harsh rhetoric, because I know Italians as really very open and with a great amount of hospitality towards everyone, and then to see my country have such a harsh rhetoric when everybody was in need of help, that was not really nice. Not everyone in the Netherlands agreed with that. My party, the Dutch Labour Party, repeatedly called for that we needed to help everyone, and especially Italy in the beginning phase. And I really hope that next year, with our elections in the Netherlands, that our stance towards this will change. Well, I will now go into the topic of today's conversation, the challenges in the post-COVID world. As I'm from the YES Presidium, I will specifically focus on the European perspective, as probably other speakers here who are active, for instance, in IUSY, have a much better view of the worldwide perspective. I will also tell you, my speech will be focused on three parts: the public health situation, and the EU perspective on that, or the YES perspective, or my personal perspective on what I think should be done, the economic aspect, and the international affairs aspect. So firstly, I think what you saw recently during this crisis was that we are not at all organized in public health. And I think for two reasons that the EU should be much more organized for public health. Firstly, that you saw that because we all have open borders with each other, that if some country is in a public health crisis, then it will affect all the other countries as well within the Union. And secondly, I think, and most importantly, that if we are making strategies to tackle public health crises, then it's much better to work together. Because, well, for instance, if you want to use a sports metaphor, look at if you would create a football team out of the whole of Europe instead of one country, well, you can create a great team. And I think that if you are making a public health strategy and you bring together the best European public health experts, then we will be also the best at tackling the crisis. I think it's very important that we therefore start to do this in a post-COVID world. And also, I think it's important that we start to look at a lot of strategies that member states have for tackling other public health crises. What we saw was that, or what we're still seeing, is that many deaths in the COVID crisis, although it's possible to die from it without any chronic illness, that many people who already had existing illnesses were the most vulnerable. And I think that's also where we should do more as a European Union, that we enable other people to live healthier lives by making, for instance, a lot of the good products more available in the Union. And I think there are also many ways of policies in different member states, what we could look on that could increase the public health of many member states. For instance, there are some countries who already looked at a sugar tax that is very effective. And if we look at all those chronic illnesses as well, I think we can be much more sustainable in our approach to public health. And this is also for the EU is of course very known for its regulation and for its standards worldwide. I think the EU has really set the standards worldwide, and that's where its powers are. So I think that we can also do more towards the world by setting standards for instance, the use of antibiotics, because that's also a major concern for the future, that new bacteria are created that are not really treatable by antibiotics. And I think if we as EU do more already now about it in advance, then this could prevent more crises of the scope of this one. For the social and economic consequences, I think I've been active in YES on this because it's my portfolio. We of course are facing a major crisis in this area, and firstly I would like to emphasize that we are now observing a paradigm shift that I think regarding public spending, that in the previous crisis there was still a lot of talk about austerity measures. I think that's something derived from the 70s and 80s, when some, in my eyes, bad economists tried to change the whole spectrum of economic thinking. For instance, Milton Friedman. They had been adopted by politicians such as Reagan and Thatcher, but they also changed the whole spectrum of thinking, and also made everyone more right-wing in their economic thinking, I think. And it's very good to see now that people are changing their views on this government spending. And secondly, what we did as YES now, so I've been active in the PES network on social affairs, and we constructed a recovery plan in YES. And that was one of the main points was to reinforce the youth guarantee. I think around 9 years ago, this was also a major point without YES or still ECOSY back then, that they tried to implement a youth guarantee that would help the people who aren't in jobs and who are under the age of 25, that they would be that there would be a lot of support to get them into jobs, or to get them into further training that would get them then into quality jobs. Last week we had a great conversation with the commissioner, the European Commissioner on social affairs, Nicolas Schmid. I was there together with Alicia and Anna, and I think it was a great conversation. We were really able to put down what we thought needed to be done now, and we're looking forward. We think many of our plans are going to end up in policy. We look forward to seeing this plan released. For instance, we are trying to change the age of the youth guarantee from 25 to 30, because then more people who are now falling into an employment gap will get the support they need. And also we really emphasized that entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, will also be supported that were not treated well by this crisis. And also that, for instance, if we give support to private sector enterprises, that that we really demand that they create quality jobs, and that we don't just give them money without any great demands in return. So I think on a final note, on the geopolitical spectrum, I think that it's really difficult to see now how in the world order China is using this situation to, for instance, do terrible things to the democracy or to the rights of the people in Hong Kong. I think what we're seeing is that the US is rapidly already more deteriorating its position abroad, and I really hope that that we don't end up with some kind of war, because this has happened, of course, in the past, that if a hegemon that is being threatened by another country, that they had to go to war to settle this. I hope this won't happen, but I think for the European Union, it's really important to become more independent in their defense structures. Of course, we can already do this in NATO now, because that will be easier, but maybe it's preferably also outside of NATO to be more independent. And I think it's really important that we invest more in what has already been done with the PESCO expansions in the past. Yeah, after this crisis, I think this will be more important than before. So thank you for giving me the floor, and I hope you have a nice discussion after this. And back to you.
Thank you, Friso. Thank you for your speech, for the updates you gave us, but also let me thank you for your words about the relations between our countries. I think we all appreciate them. Now the time has come for another friend from YES. We have been talking about the challenges that have to be faced by our generation. So who better than Bruno Gonçalves, students and education network coordinator, to enliven the issue. So Bruno, you have the floor.
Hello. First of all, I want to thank you all the GD federations that have come together. Thank a particular greeting to Caterina, to Alberto, and to Julia, who I've met in a long time during my ES activities, also USY ones. And I want to say that it's for me a pleasure to be here with you. I mean, more than ever, we have to discuss, we have to reflect on different answers that we are giving to this crisis, because more than everything, I think that our generation needs us to pursue this combat, because we cannot go back to the crisis that we had 10 years ago, a decade ago, that has actually suspended all our dreams. And I think we are in this precise moment discussing it. It is always a pleasure to come and to visit, even though it is online, Italian friends. And on my intervention, I would like to focus two main things: the geopolitical situation that I would leave for the last part of my intervention, but firstly, the social answer that we have to give and the social agenda that we have to push forward in this crisis. And regarding this, I have to say that more than ever, we need a strong social policy package to this crisis. This was something that did not happen in the last crisis, where we focused more on the economic impacts and we forgot some of our people. When I say our people, some of European countries that were most affected, and I can speak a lot about this being from Portugal, but I think this is really important. And I can also add that for this, the Portuguese presidency of the European Union, that is going to happen next year in the first semester, is preparing already an informal council that is going to be held in Porto. But this European Council, informal European Council, is going to be attached to a social summit. And this has a particular relevance, because more than ever, we need to discuss what is happening after the economic crisis. We are going to have, certainly, if the projections are right, we are certainly having a lot of impact in terms of our workers, our youth, the way that wealth is going to be redistributed after this crisis. And we have to tackle this now. And I think that we have to pave the way to guarantee in the European-wide level an action plan for the European pillar of social rights. This was something that was a major victory for the social democratic family in Europe. We ratified this in 2017. And this actually constitutes a major political agenda. I mean, when we talk about the pillar of social rights, we are talking about gender equality. We are talking about the involvement of workers. We are talking about education. We are talking about active employment. We are talking about childcare, health systems. And I think this is the answer that Europe needs now. And we cannot wait a lot to have it like we waited in the last time 4 or 5 years to come together. I mean, I think that my hope today is that we have a solid response, and we pursue our values not only of freedom and respect for human rights, but also of solidarity when it comes to the European answer, because without solidarity, our foundation doesn't make much sense. And now about geopolitics, I don't know if I have much time, but it's really hard to sum it all. But when we talk about geopolitics, I always like to go back to history to see what it teaches us. I mean, with the exception, we can see that with the exception of maybe the last 200 years, Europe has never been hegemoniously the center of the world. I mean, we have had long empires, but this also happened at the same time that Indian and Chinese and Southeast Asia had also great civilizations. And what's happened with the first revolution and the first industrial revolution was that Europe actually came forward. And now we can see that our Occidental civilizations, not only from Europe, but majorly now since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the US, have developed, I would say, not to say a supremacy, but a key role in what comes to the worldwide leadership. But once again, I think that in the last years, we have made a lot of mistakes. I mean, first, the way America developed And in the beginning, we can all reckon that it was the foundation fathers of America had inspiration in a lot of philosophers and politicians from Europe. We can remember not only the French Revolution, Immanuel Kant, and then Montesquieu. I mean, these were all people that influenced how America should be today. And what we see now is that instead of a democracy in America where we have equal opportunities, where we have freedom for everyone, not only liberal individual freedoms, but also collective freedoms of choosing, not only from Democrats or Republicans, but for a major change regarding policies like social democratic policies. And what we can see now is that America is majorly plutocracy. I mean, is the main topics of the political agenda are actually much influenced by the people who have the money. I mean, the capital and major companies. And in the last years, I would say that China has made some developments. I mean, after the Cultural Revolution, we saw that shopping opened China to the world. I mean, when China opened itself and its commerce to the world was actually a big step forward. And but this also comes to a reflection that I would like to do now. That is, what is our paper? What is the role of Europe right now? We see countries like China having a major impact in worldwide politics. I mean, not only from the GDP that is actually increasing every year and increasing more than any other country, also the inequalities that are being raised and that weren't, for example, 50 years ago. But I think that Europe, more than ever, has to have a role of not being neutral, but playing here a role of someone that moderates. At the same time, we cannot afford anymore the expansionist politics that were taken into consideration and taken into action in the last years, not only from the US, but also from our countries and the European Union itself. And we have to be really careful, but at the same time, we have to be attentive, and we have to be sure that we are not complicit with people and countries that are actually disrespecting international law and human rights. Brando just spoke a few minutes ago about the question on Palestine. I know that IUSY, and yes, I mean, we have here Anna that can also speak about that, but IUSY and yes have been really active about this. And I think that for me, the Europe and the European Union that I want to live in is a European Union that fights not only for solidarity, but fights for human rights all over the world. And I think that I could say much more about this topic, but just to conclude, I would say that if we want to succeed this time, we cannot afford to get anyone left behind, because if we do that again, we will be on the brink of destroying our European project, and that has big and really nefastic impacts to the world we live in. And I hope that it doesn't happen. Thank you a lot for inviting me, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruno, for your amazing suggestions. And I'm gonna give the floor to Philip Freeman. Phil is a student of Eastern Affairs in the University of London, and he has a long participation to YES events and YES activities as International Secretary for Labor Students in the past. So I'm sure, of course, he's both Italian and British, so he definitely has, let's say, a sort of double involvement in both of Italian and English politics, and of course because of his studies in the Eastern Affairs. So please, you have the floor, Phil. Thank you.
Thank you, Alberto, and thank you, Caterina and Giulia. Yes, I'm quite upset there's not a GD federation here in London. We do have a PD, but not GD. So I would have liked to have voted for you, but this time I can't. Yes, as Alberto said, I'm involved in the Labour Party here in the UK. although I don't have any position anymore. So today I'll be talking about the EU and its relations with its eastern neighbors, so that's Belarus, Russia, Ukraine, and Moldova, and with the so-called Western Balkan Six. There's Bosnia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Albania, and Kosovo. So starting with the eastern side, and so obviously the biggest and most important of the four is Russia. And what we're seeing with the COVID crisis is the Russian regime really not really knowing what to do, not really being able to handle itself too well. So Vladimir Putin's his image is based around being strong and being able to, I'm sure we've already all seen the pictures of him on horseback without a shirt on, but the problem, he can show that he's strong if there's a terrorist attack or if there's an earthquake, he can turn up and he can show that he's there with people. Because the virus isn't a physical thing, he's terrified of getting ill, and he's terrified of being ill and doing like what Boris Johnson did and being ill for a couple of weeks and being out of the picture. So what he's done is he's very much left all the dealing with the crisis to regional governors who just haven't, and he hasn't given them the money or the support to effectively deal with the crisis. And so now what we're seeing is it's come really at the worst moment for the regime, because they're just having the referendum for a new constitution or constitutional amendments that will let him stay in power until another 16 years, a long time, but and basically allows him to continue being president as long as he wants. And they've rushed out a referendum which is not legal, which is not needed, and which is going to cause issues for contamination with corona. So what we're going to see is, so how does this relate to the EU? Well, basically the Russian regime is now very much focused in on itself. It's focused on trying to contain the crisis, the COVID crisis, but also trying to legitimize what is basically a semi-legal coup against the constitution. So it will be very difficult for any sort of constructive, in my view, constructive dialogue with Russia, because the regime will feel itself feels itself very under threat domestically, and in my view, it won't want to interact constructively with the EU. And this is the same with Belarus. And now move on to Belarus, where, as I'm sure some of you might have seen, there's been quite remarkable protests against the regime due to an upcoming election. And it's gotten so, the protests have spread so far that there's even been police officers, army officers, riot police taking pictures of themselves, obviously without the face, with holding anti-government slogans and putting them on social media. So we really don't know, that it really could go either way. So the president, Alexander Lukashenko, who's ruled Belarus since 1991, has said he doesn't want another Maidan, that there's people trying to subvert Belarus from the West, and all sorts of classic strongman rhetoric. And he is appointed to a new government, ministers, or especially a prime minister, more associated with the security service sort of faction of the regime. So whereas before, Belarus was Lukashenko played a very clever game between Russia and the EU, and getting cheap oil from Russia and aid from the EU, and playing them off against each other. Now what we'll see is probably much like Russia, a regime that feels itself under threat and very very worried and probably not willing to negotiate as much with the EU. Whether these two regimes do something stupid, we really can't, we really don't know. And you know, the Russians especially, and well, the Russian state has a tendency of, you know, people, intelligence officers or diplomats, or basically people acting by themselves to doing things that they see as in the best interest of Russia or whatever, like, for example, the Skripal poisoning. And, you know, we could see something bad happen. That's all I can really say about it. And then with Ukraine, so obviously last year there was an election in which Volodymyr Zelensky won by a huge. He won a huge mandate, and especially his party won control of the parliament. And so there's been problems where people have thought that his party, he was too close to a very influential oligarch, Ihor Kolomoisky, who's sort of been seen as not controlling Zelensky, but certainly having some influence. And now we're seeing the Zelensky distancing himself from Kolomoisky, which is a very good sign. But Ukrainian society seems very tired, or not tired, but seems to have lost the enthusiasm that it had during the Maidan, and now very much was focusing on anti-corruption and dealing with the COVID crisis as well. So it really is, the EU has not pulled its side of the bargain, so to say, and very much the sort of reform process in Ukraine has been driven by the IMF. And obviously we all know the IMF has its own ideas of how the world, you know, works. And a lot of loans and aids have come with significant conditions. One that was really worrying is about the weakening of labor market regulations, and basically turning Ukraine into one of basically the country in Europe with the lowest labor regulations, or the lowest level of labor regulations, which is obviously, you know, not something as we as socialists and progressives absolutely, you know, it's nothing, we do not want that. So we really need to make sure that the EU is supporting, you know, the integration of Ukraine into sort of the European space, because if that starts to slow down and Ukrainian society sees that actually maybe the EU is not so keen on having them, then there might be a reaction from within Ukrainian society. And sorry, I mean, going quite well, but I'll skip Moldova because it's sort of more of the same. But we'll go into North Macedonia and the Balkans, and this same idea of the EU must be shown to be for integration very, very clearly, and for democratization especially, has been shown tragically by the example of North Macedonia, where there was a peaceful revolution a couple of years ago, and our sister party, the Social Democrats of Macedonia, came to power and you know, immediately North Macedonia went up several places in the democracy rankings of democracy, and you know, there was the Prespa deal with Greece, which resolved, you know, a very, very long running dispute in the Balkans, you know, which obviously doesn't happen very often. And you know, North Macedonia applied for. There was the discussions on the European Council about North Macedonia being allowed to start negotiations for accession to the EU, which was blocked by Macron and Rutte, I think. And what we immediately saw is the North Macedonian government fell, and it's been replaced sort of by a caretaker government. I think there'll be elections in early next month, and so a lot of the reform, it's not just about the integration of North Macedonia into the EU, but also a lot of the reforms on anti-corruption, on democratization, on civil rights, on de-oligarchization, if we want to say, has been put in jeopardy because of Macron. And in a similar situation, so that's a similar situation to Ukraine. And just to finish up, obviously, we had Brando was talking about the US and the challenges that we're now facing from the US, and I just want to share this sort of story with you before I realize I don't have that much time. But basically, a year ago, this is sort of talking about Kosovo now. Sorry, a year ago, the Kosovo had an election which was won by the, we could say, anti-corruption sort of centre-left Vetu Vedosi party, which is a self-determination party, and they formed a government which was, Kosovo has basically been ruled since independence by former commanders of the Kosovo Liberation Army who have taken, controlled the political process and the distribution of economic favors very strongly. And so what we saw was a government being formed by progressive anti-corruption sort of party, which immediately was undermined by the US Special Representative to the Western Balkans, Stephen Grinnell. And if you maybe, we don't have any German comrades here, but Stephen Grinnell was Trump's ambassador to the EU and to Germany, whose role was to take down Angela Merkel. So, okay, it's cool. So this is, so I've just been told we need to start. So this is basically what we're seeing is the US intervening to bring down basically an elected government, an progressive anti-corruption government, and in a way sort of team up with the Orban side of the EPP to prevent further, well, not to prevent European integration, but to prevent democratization and anti-corruption and sort of all the things we like as progressives. And so, sorry I overran, but that was, I hope that's been interesting for you.
Thank you very much, Phil. It was really a deep speech on European and Eastern affairs. So very interesting. I'm giving the floor to the Secretary General of the movement, the Jeunes Socialistes, the French movement, so of young socialists, Nathan Abou. He's really a friend of GD and of Italy, and it's really a pleasure to having him here because I think also Julian and Caterina they think like me that it's important to promote the relationships through our nations, and so the cooperation, the collaboration between our parties, of course. So you have the floor, and thank you very much for being here.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me about this very important subject. So I also believe, obviously, that it is essential that we try and improve the cooperation between our states and between our organizations. GD Italy is obviously also a friend of MGS, and I think that we are facing many similar issues because of the geographical and cultural context of our countries. What I think is probably the most important thing about Europe right now is that we're going through a huge crisis, but this crisis can also be an opportunity. And I think that what is happening right now in European politics is a sort of revolution in itself, because well, we've had decades of coalitions with the EPP and with, well, what used to be ALDE and now is Renew. And those coalitions have led us to disappoint our electors in past elections. For at least it's what it feels like from France. It feels like we have disappointed our electors because of those coalitions. And what has just happened with this Corona crisis is that a lot of subjects that we couldn't talk about, that we couldn't bring forward to the table because of the crisis, are now like fully discussed, and like options that are actually going to happen. And I'm thinking obviously about, well, the common debt. Obviously, it's not really current bonds that are being created right now, but it is still somehow a form of common European debt. The European Parliament is also discussing right now the creation of its own resources. So they're basically some sort of what one might call federal taxes, even though we're not a federal state yet. Though I believe that here, as young socialists, we all look forward toward having a more united and more federalized Europe in many ways. And the fact that the conservatives and the liberals of Europe right now have been clueless about how to respond to this crisis without those measures have left us a lot of political space to respond. And right now, it's our solutions that are being put on the table to solve this crisis. And so even though we are not going to put an end to fiscal dumping next year or in the upcoming months, I think that a huge progresses are made. For instance, we've heard Commissioner for Budget Han talk and defend the creation of tax on profits by transnational companies all over the EU. So he advocated for a 5.5% tax. I think that, well, around this table, we are probably a bit more ambitious about those taxes, but it's already incredible. We have a conservative commissioner that is advocating for a transnational tax, and that is an open door. It's an open door for us to create a real social Europe in the upcoming mandates. So obviously, we're not going to see that real social Europe within the 2 or 3 years, but because the taboos about debt, about taxes, about all of those forms of intricate cooperation, they have been broken. And now I think that we will have a lot more, it will be a lot easier for us to discuss about all of those options in the upcoming elections, and when we will succeed in the upcoming elections, when we will finally have a beautiful left majority in the European Parliament, then we will have all of the tools already in place for us to create that social Europe we've been dreaming of for so long. But it's not all about budget. There are also other forms of cooperation that we should try and improve. And I think that one of the lessons that we can learn from the crisis that we are experiencing is also about coordination in terms of border management and health equipment. So what we've seen at the beginning of the crisis is our borders that have been closing without any form of coordination or cooperation. And right now, there have been talks about the way that we should reopen our borders to countries that are external to the European Union. And it's it is kind of surprising to think that, well, we still do not have a competent entity to manage those borders. We should be able to collectively decide when we open our borders and who we open our borders to, and that should not be left up to like single heads of states to decide who opens or closes the doors. And so obviously, I regret deeply the departure of our British friends from the European Union, but it might also be the opportunity to talk about those subjects that would have been a lot more difficult to embrace before the crisis. Another form of cooperation that we could talk about is the management of health equipment and the management of drugs and all of those things. So we already have a European agency for drugs, and it is in charge of approving what drugs can be sold within the single market. However, we do not have a collective management of health equipment and resources, and that has led to some very surprising situations where we've had countries fight one another for like personal equipment for those Macs that I'm actually not wearing correctly, because otherwise you wouldn't hear me. So we need to have European-wide stocks for those masks and to prepare for the next crisis to come. And so, and then finally, I think that maybe one of the subjects that we might talk about is, if we are to have a common border management and closer cooperation and all of that, we also need to talk about the way we protect and defend those borders. During this crisis, we have left refugees in like horrible situations on the islands of Greece and at all of the doors of Europe, and it is just inconceivable for us socialists to manage those borders in those ways. I think that there should be a more democratic way of discussing how Frontex, for instance, operates on the borders of the EU, and we should definitely have a discussion about the Dublin agreements and the way we are actually protecting those who are seeking refuge in the European Union. Because what we have seen on those islands is not tolerable and does not match what the values that we're supposed to uphold as socialists. Finally, one of the last subject I want to talk about the Europe after the crisis, it's our relationship with China and the United States. The United States right now have proven on so many different occasions that they do not consider us as an ally anymore. They have been, well, the president have been taunting us. They have like declared us their enemy. And in the meantime, we have stood there and we haven't said anything. And in the meantime, President Trump has been using force, has been deploying military troops over the country, and has been violating every value that we stand for as citizens of the European Union. I think it is great time that we reevaluate our relationship in the United States, but that we also reevaluate our relationship with China, that we have been welcoming with open arms for a long time now, even though Xi Jinping has also made it very clear that the reason why he's been trading with us and the reason why he's been interacting with us is to promote his new world order. And even though he pretends to be a communist, it is pretty clear right now that the policies that he's been leading are nowhere near anything that we might stand for. It is not communism that they have; it's a sort of wrecked capitalism and mixed with a very authoritative state. And we need to stand up to that. The European Union needs to stand up when China tries to buy ports or buy pieces of land on our territories. And I think that there's been a lot of talks about economic sovereignty lately after the terrible health equipment management that we've been facing in some of our countries. I think that the economic sovereignty comes with that. We cannot let China promote its values by buying us strategic pieces of land in our territory. So I think that to conclude, this crisis has shown us the many threats that we're facing, but has also shown us that there is an opportunity to create more united, more federalist, more social Europe in the upcoming months and years. And we have to take on that opportunity, but we also have to reevaluate a lot of the policies that we've led and the friendships that we've had with the external world.
Thank you so much, Nathan, for this insight from France. We all hope in a integration, in a European integration inspired to the principle of social Europe. Now I'm going to leave the floor to our comrade, Ludovico Manzoni, coordinator of GD Milan, to introduce the second part of this first round. And I really would like to thank him for working to make this session possible. Ludovico, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm proud to introduce two of our Latin American comrades, Eduardo Oliveira, who's the deputy president of the Juventude Socialista of Rio de Janeiro, and Rodrigo Baeza from Chile, who is the vice president of the Juventude Socialista of Chile and the vice president of IUSY, who I'm proud to be able to call my comrade as well, since we were together in Chile while I was living there and being part of Juventude Socialista myself. I think it's going to be very important to hear from them, because unfortunately, Latin American wine has not been as visible as other countries in European media, has been hit the hardest from the COVID-19 pandemic. Now that the epidemic is, at least its first wave is finally subsiding in Europe, this is the moment where it's raging on the hardest in the Latin American continent. Unfortunately, as we know, Brazil has a terrible situation. It's the country with the second most cases of COVID in the world. And Chile as well, unfortunately, has now more cases than Italy. These results, I believe, are not a coincidence, as our comrades will explain to us, but are the results of failed right-wing policies of the Chilean and Brazilian government. As we know, Bolsonaro has ignored the epidemics multiple times, calling it a hoax, not recognizing the danger of the virus. And Chile, unfortunately, is one of the countries who has been most affected by neoliberal policies, with a private healthcare system who, I'm sure, as we are going to hear, is not able to withstand the impact of worldwide pandemics. I think that as socialists and social democrats and as member of the European Union is very important that we stand with these countries, that we are able to show them their solidarity, because not only their livelihood, not only their healthcare system is in peril, but unfortunately their democratic system as well is in danger. And we need, I think, as a compact European Union, as a compact socialist and democratic group, be able to reach out to them, to show our solidarity and to encourage our countries to also give concrete help. In Italy, in the hardest peak of the pandemic, we relied a lot on international solidarity, on foreign doctors coming to Italy, on international supplies of protective materials. Now, I believe we need to do the same with other countries now that we are outside of the peak and the worst phase is over. We need to give back to other countries. We need to use the expertise that we've accumulated to help the rest of the world. Because, I mean, one thing this pandemic has shown is that this crisis is global. The economic crisis that is following is global as well, and we will be able to fix it only with global solution. Thanks, and now, Rodrigo, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank you to the organization of this activity. It's very important to have not only to share news about the coronavirus, but also to have this debate, discussion about the post-pandemic situation. With that, to say hello to our comrades in our very friendly organization, international community that has GD, the Giovani Democratici in Italy. And it's really good to see very good friends of this international work. Has Anna, has Caterina, has Ludovico. But I want you to make a very important effort to in 10 minutes talk about at least about 3 topics, because I think it's very important to share about situation in Latin America, in our country in Chile, but also about the reality of the post-pandemic situation, or maybe to see some expectation or views about that. About Latin America, Ludovico say very well that's one of the most affected areas in the world. Has now the sadly leadership of the situation about the coronavirus, with 4 countries that leads the statistic about the infected and also the active cases and the diseases about this illness, that is Mexico, Brazil, Chile, and Peru, that have a very important number of cases in every country, but also is mixed with a very important political process in our region. Ludovico talked about a few words about the situation with Bolsonaro, that our comrade from Brazil, it's very good to talk about that. But also we have Mexico with the new presidency of López Obrador, this new progressive president of Mexico, and with Alberto Fernandez in Argentina, that also is a new president, that have a lot of trouble to manage this pandemic situation. It's very known that South America and Latin America in general don't have the best health system, but not also that we have a very important process of, in general, of neoliberalist politics, public policy about this economic idea. So the weakness of the health system is general in our continent, in our region, and that's have a very important relationship with the spread of the COVID-19 in our region. Just one thing that's obviously have mixed with our very important religious thinking. I mean, especially in Central America, we have a very important situation in there that people don't trust in the COVID-19, the existence, and we have a very important and special case in Nicaragua that the president in there, Ortega, called to demonstration against the virus, and have a very ridiculous situation in there. But also have some cases in other countries in that area, in Honduras, and also in Costa Rica, that I think. So that situation in Latin America, it's very worse. See, it's worse if one of the worst situation in the world about the coronavirus. We have a very poorly health system, and we apply a lot of neoliberalist public policies and things like that. Has a heritage from the dictatorship in the 80s and the 90s. But especially in Chile, we have a very difficult situation. We have a very small country. We have 19 million of people. But we have one of the highest rates of dead people in here. We have almost 5,000 people that have disease about the COVID-19. Daily, we have a very important quantity of dead people, almost 250 right now. I mean, that's the statistic of yesterday. And the people that are infected with the virus is more than 260,000 in our country. And that have a very important limit about our political process here in Chile. I don't know if you hear or read something about the news about Chile and the demonstration in our country the last year in October that make a very important agreement in the political system to advance, to have a process to create a new constitution, to derogate the old constitution that comes from the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet from the 80s. And we're supposed to have our referendum in April, in the last April, but for the situation and our situation of exceptional constitutional rules, we don't have the possibility to make a campaign or anything like that. So move the calendar to October of this year. But we have a very important concern about if that's really possible to make the whole process, the whole constitutional process, because we see that the government here in Chile, that is from the right wing, with Sebastián Piñera leading the government, don't have a very important will to make this referendum and the whole constitutional process. We have a very important situation with the democratic views here in Chile. I mean, our right is not very likely to be in a democratic position in general. I mean, the pandemic situation have shown their authoritarian views, not only with the army in the street, with the police, the national police, taking a lot of people in prison under the pandemic situation, but also with the curfew and a lot of democratic and civilian liberties that have been cut by the government. So, in that point of view, we're very worried about that, about the situation. That's make me enter to the final point, the final issue. That's the post-pandemic situation. I mean, from here, from Latin America, we see a very important. We don't see that maybe the whole capitalist system will or will change in their logic, and we're going to have a very, I mean, the best world when the pandemic is over, because we hear about that discuss. We hear about this that speech when we have the financial crisis in 2008, the last decade. We hear a lot about the change in the bank, in the markets, and the new ethics that must comes to change the world and a better world, an humanitarian capitalism. But we see that that's not changed a lot. I mean, it's very difficult to have an important change when the people, the elite of the world is the same. But we have concrete points that we see that's going to be very important in the next decade, and especially for us, for the left. The one of them is the democratic situation. I mean, the whole thing about the authoritarian and this way of control of the society has the Chinese style, must have a very important debate in our organization. I mean, if that is a threat to our society, and how that kind of idea penetrates in our political organization. I mean, it's very worrying to have the digital control, the private life, your data, and that whole thing that's very conflicted, especially with the civil rights. The second point is maybe the value of the state in our society. In countries like Chile, we have a very important tradition of not believe in the state. But with the pandemic situation, we must come back to the social rights, to the protect of the state, the welfare state, and a renewal of that idea of the social democratic principle. I mean, health, education, social security, housing, and another thing that's the state provide to the people, and especially with the poorest in our society. And that maybe give us a space to think more about how to take that opportunity for our people, for our communities, and make that change possible. And the third point, maybe it's how we think the science and the technology in our society, and especially in the relation between the North countries and the South countries. And we have in every international panel and discussion, we have this gap between the North and the South. I'm sorry. Because it's obvious that we, for example, in Latin America, it's very probably that we don't have the solution of the COVID-19 very soon. I think that probably that Africa or Asia also don't have the solution in the first place. It's very probably that Europe and the United States and China and probably Russia, who the countries who will provide that solution. So that's open and a debate about how we relation between our countries and the continents to try to solve our differences and inequalities between the region. I think that's all. I really try to respect the time, so I leave with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo, for your comprehensive vision about Latin America. And now we give the floor to Eduardo to tell us what's happening in Brazil and what's happening with Bolsonaro and the COVID crisis. Eduardo, your turn.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to talk with you about the Brazilian situation. I wish I could talk about a better situation in Brazil, but it's not possible with Bolsonaro as president. So to understanding the whole situation in Brazil, it's necessary to talk about some things, okay? In Brazil, we have one president, 26 governors, and more than 5,500 mayors, and all of them have some kind of power to face the coronavirus crisis. Our response has been defined by the clash between mayors, governors, and the president. And as you know, the president is a right-wing extremist who still underestimate the dangers of the disease. In this period, we had two different health ministers in the power, and they are fired. They were fired because they would not advertise the hydroxychloroquine as the solution against COVID-19. When Bolsonaro was a congressman in an interview on television, he said that at least 30,000 Brazilians should die in a civil war, and this should the way for a solution for the Brazilian problems. What he's doing now is the exactly way he said once. So the name of what Bolsonaro is doing in Brazil is genocide. Actually, we can say that Bolsonaro doesn't care about people dying. It's the real situation in Brazil now. Since the beginning of the coronavirus crisis, Bolsonaro has been against any types of measures to control this pandemic since the beginning. So at first, he compared just a little fraud. Later, he stated that people die all the time, and he was not a grave digger to know how many people were dying every day from coronavirus. He has not ordered any kind of lockdown and actively fights against any measure by governors or mayors, even going to the Supreme Court to cancel these measures. It's how Bolsonaro is trying to save lives. Actually, he's trying to kill people. Now, Brazil has got 1 million confirmed cases of coronavirus and 56,000 deaths. This week, Bolsonaro uttered his first message for the families of those that died of COVID. And this was a shame. This was just accordion rendering of Schubert's Ave Maria without any other words. And when you talk about the economy side, Bolsonaro has tried to offer 200 reais financial help. It's almost 32 euros a month. And Congress ordered an increase to 600 reais a month, almost 96 euros. So people in general could get this help, financial help, which went mostly to the middle class and military officers. So, and actually people that really needed this help had a lot of problems to get it. This help was offered to 3 months, and there is no plans to renew this. Actually, when we see this situation in Brazil, we see almost people that really needed this financial help hasn't got it. So instead of the federal government is trying to kill people, some other governors and others governments is trying to keep people safe. And I would like to talk with you about a specific experience here in Brazil against the COVID and against this pandemic situation. It's my hometown, Niterói, and here the mayor is from my party, it's from PDT, and he's really trying to keep people safe and trying to save the economy of the city. So since the federal government hadn't a program to maintain the financial help, the mayor ordered 12 months financial help to the poor people in the city. Niterói today has the biggest test capacity of the country, and Niterói opened a specific hospital to treat coronavirus patients. Niterói has implemented a lockdown with something that didn't happen in all the country. So Niterói and other cities have implemented a lockdown. This is not something that the president tried to do. And this is to show that it's possible to do something to save lives if you want to do. And that's not the case of the president. This is not the case of the whole country, because as I said, the president is trying to kill people. And it's difficult to think about a future of Brazil with Bolsonaro. Actually, when you think about how to do here, I think that there is a necessity to the left and central left wings parties to think this situation together and trying to do something about Bolsonaro. When you think a post-COVID world, we have to think to strengthen the international integration, to strengthen the socialist experiences, the solidarity, and of course, the democracy. While you are living here in Brazil, it's a tragedy, actually. We have to do something more integrative. We have to do something more to think about the lives of poor people that live in Brazil. Because we have a right-wing extremist president here in Brazil. And when we think how to answer the questions about Brazil, actually we don't have so many answers to do, because our experience is terrible. Actually, now the president is trying to save his family from corruption's investigations, and he is not afraid about the COVID and concerned about the people are dying every day. 1 million Brazilians has coronavirus confirmed. 56,000 people has died. And when we think about what's happening in Brazil, we think that it's a totally tragedy. So we have to have integration thinking, international experience to try to answer these questions. Bruno, okay, no, something. So thank you so much for this invitation. I tried to answer how it's happening here in Brazil with Bolsonaro, and I'm here for other questions if you want. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo and Eduardo, for this interesting and breathtaking witnesses. Now we are going to start the third session of our discussion. So we're going to have a round of 3-minute speeches by our Italian comrades. We're going to start with Francesco Forte from GD Campania. Francesco, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Francesco and I'm Secretary elected of GD Campania, a region of southern Italy, known, for example, for Napoli, for our international comrades. So, what in this pandemic, what became central again is the role of state. When things go bad, the people need the state to ensure their safety, and the safety of the weakest part of the society, the safety of the economy. I think that it's something we must start from, and go when things go bad, we have to to re-enhance this role of the state and accelerate, for instance, the path of international cooperation for the sustainable development. It's important to create in each of our countries a civic consciousness capable of understanding how the cost of the objective are necessary to reach, because the war of our generation is not against other countries, but it's a war. It's not a war to grab resources, but it's a war for guarantee them for the next generations, and to protect and establish international public goods such as peace and environment for the future. In this framework, the European Union has stepped its economy ambition at a level on. We can talk about the SURE program, the Next Generation EU program, that include the first nucleus of real European economic policies. However, I think that in order to be efficient, the funds made available must be invested in both material and immaterial capital. Because in our society that is a broad social divisions, and so this kind of new policies must be based on solidarity and intended focused on young people. I am thinking about investments in education, in research, and cover a broad spectrum in that material needed in order not only related, for example, to study places or materials, so on. So in particular, the investment, we believe that the direction should be on infrastructure such as for example, the broadband, the internet connection, because we have to, in Italy is a problem, but I think also in other countries, we have to bring them not only in the city center, a good internet connection, but also through the countryside, the internal areas of the country. Because the digital divide in these months of pandemic has been very, we felt that problem. And so I think we had students, workers that we're not able to work from home for their instrument. They sometimes not have the instruments needed for to follow the lessons for students or adequately carry on their duties, their tasks for workers. So that's quite something we have to invest on. With a good amount of realism, I think it appears necessary that we have to indicate a path of contemporary responsibility and solidarity within the European actors. But it must be a sort of responsibility made not of bureaucratic numbers and criteria to meet, to respect, but a new bond, a new pact of trust that European investment, the money of European citizens, serve to strengthen the European economy, at the same time strengthen both social justice, increasing the power of purchase of citizens and strengthen of the internal market and the rule of law. The European budget, I think, must be rethought. It must reach a share higher than 1-3% of the GDP. It must have endowed with own resources, and such as, for example, an example could be the carbon border taxes. And it must be determined with a 5-year financial framework in order to strengthen its democratic process with the term of the Parliament and the Commission. And if we establish a European tax jurisdiction, it must be accompanied by the distribution of new competencies according to the principle of subsidiarity. In some aspects, such as health and welfare policies or industrial policies. The pandemic has made it clear that certain challenges require institutions capable of providing global responses. The individual national responses mitigated the problem, but at the end, it was understood that the only response that is truly positive in the long run is that can be given by policy coordination at a higher level. In this way, I think the European Union would effectively become able to put in place a great recovery plan by strengthening strategic sectors and which are now unable to be fully developed. And so to concretize these ambitions, I think that we have to involve European citizens and civil society. We should therefore pretend that the Conference of the Future of Europe, promised by the European Commission before the pandemic, must be relaunched with a specific aim of elaborating a new constituent pact between European and citizens and institutions. And in this way, I think that citizens' trust and confidence in the European project will be enhanced again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Just to
Thank you very much, Francesco. I'm going to introduce the next speaker, Gabriele Giudici, Secretary of GD Bergamo, so a comrade from my same region, and he's gonna speak about the role of sustainability and mobility as a goal for the new Europe. So please, Gabriele, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks to the organizer and those who talk about these very interesting issues. As Alberto said before, I'm Gabriele Giudici and I'm the Secretary of Young Democrats of the province of Bergamo. When we talk about future of Europe and world after the coronavirus crisis, I think especially about two things. The first is the urban work dimension, and the second one is the climate change. Because in many countries, and especially in Italy, the proliferation of digital tools used during the lockdown brought out the theme of smart working. I believe that we have to act as socialist forces to regulate this type of work, that to increase the mass phenomenon, to keep the working class and the people to the center of these actions. If you work from home, you can have better manage time and less stress. You can improve your social life. You can spend better your time for the family and social life and so on. But this change in work team changed the urban and local dimension of cities and countryside. Urban dynamics are a mirror of a society. And by analyzing them, we can understand the social and economic developments of an entire social economic system. For this reason, a decrease of workflows in urban conglomerates, and especially in Italy, where we don't have mega cities, and in Europe we have medium-sized cities with a lot of small cities, a little town, very linked about other cells. This change in workforce can decrease the power of a big city and increase the power of the margin territory and the countryside power in the economic system. We can have also in this typology of new dimension of work and urban, less pollution, less roads, less congestion, and also less urbanization. So the work typology and the work evolution is really connected to the climate change and how we as socialist forces can improve our political issues to fight the climate change. In the same time, the rents of the city could decrease, and so the power of the city itself can change. And it can have also effects on the political system, in particular in cities that have a global dimension. So our parties have the duty to manage the change in cities and work for complete the task of the Green New Deal. The theme so is not to feed the social elevator in this time particular, but to guarantee class social growth. Only in this way can private investment also be strongly direct on green investment, changing also, so in this way, the neoliberal direction where the restart and we can see in these days, it can be provided to boost a new great consumer society. We have to fight that, to fight the climate change. So in these conditions, the world local local and global, as now today more power than yesterday, because we have to manage the local dimension, the increase of working class prosperity, to give a direction to private investment in our change in political issues and in sustainability, because we can have a very strong political investment on Green New Deal and so on. But if we have a lower capacity for the population to invest in this typology, we have a lower capacity as public, as socialist party, to fight this typology of climate change and pollution. So I think that as socialist power, we have to focus about this type of investment and this type of activity, because workforce and the urban and work dimension are really connected to climate change and sustainability. That's all. Thank you for your attention, and good afternoon, good evening for everyone.
Thank you so much, Gabriele. And let me add that I think I can interpret everyone's feelings here if I say that we are all particularly close to your federation, to the old community of Bergamo. Now I'm giving the floor to another Italian comrade, Alberto Giorgini from GD Liguria. Alberto, the floor is yours.
I'm here on a train.
Yeah, we may have some connection problems with Alberto. I would like to ask if there anybody who wants to make a speech, to contribute to the discussion, because I see other GD people connected, but I'm not sure they want to have a speech to take the floor. So we can check if Alberto is able to talk to us, or we can switch to Davide, or I would like to thank some guys that are not going to talk, but are working with us on this group discussion, and also about European and international affairs. For example, I would like to thank Morgan Boliviera from Friuli Venezia Giulia, northern region of Italy, for the contribution about scientific and medical cooperation between member states of the European Union. I would like to thank Giovani Democratici of Veneto for the contribution, for sharing the streaming and taking part to our video, to the preliminary discussion we had, the Giovani Democratici of Basilicata, of Molise, of many southern territories. And I don't know if we can listen Davide Schinderi, who contributed to from Milan, to coordinate a bit the Italian comrades. And a surprise is entering. Evin is here, is connecting to our call. Okay, hi Evin.
Hi.
Ciao.
I think that Alberto can go with the introduction. Okay, thank you so much.
So thank you very much, Ivan, for being here. I know you're still in travel to Brussels, so thank you very much. I also, to some extent, I would like to add that you're really an inspiring politician for all of us. Also as a young woman in politics, and also as a representative of European socialists in the European Parliament. So
thank you, Alberto. I'm here on a trail.
Maybe, yeah. There is a problem, I guess, with one of the speaker. Anyway, thank you very much again. I just want to say that, yeah, it's a pleasure. And you have the floor now if you have time to talk a bit about what you are following in the European Parliament in particular, and also about the topics we discussed during this long session. But actually, we will also send you, of course, the output of this event in order to be in touch and maybe collaborate for future initiative, because of course we're still looking for international cooperations amongst the federations and amongst MEPs, also not just coming from Italy, but of course also from other countries. That's really important for us as GD.
Well, first of all, thank you very much to you guys, and I'm really sorry I'm so late. I've been traveling, as you see and hear, and it feels like I've been at the UC festival or something, and I'm on the way home. So I apologize for that. And thank you also for the kind word. I mean, of course, with my background with UC and so on, my own youth organization back then, and I, as far as I know, still have very good relation with among others, JD within the both European but also international social democratic family. And I think, I mean, the international solidarity has always been our strong side as socialists and social democrats. And COVID-19, for example, has really shown the importance also of these matters, I would say. Some people would say, or some forces, not some people, but some forces are trying to say that, well, look at the situation, and we would and trying to speak in favor of nationalism, protectionism, etc., etc. But I would rather say that this current situation, unfortunate situation, has shown the importance of cross-border cooperation, both within the EU but also internationally. So saying that, this is also connected to, of course, the work that I'm doing. And as far as I saw, Brando was also with us previously. So I haven't heard the whole discussion you have had, but I myself quite a lot in the parliament, focusing on democracy, rule of law, and fundamental rights within Europe, but also, of course, globally. So I'm sitting in one committee called LIBE. It's civil rights, home affairs, and so on. And the other is foreign policies, and the third is development issues. So my committees are very much focused on how the situation, when it comes to the common, the fundamental values, are within EU, but also an EU who would want to take a leadership for these issues globally, need to stand up for these values and fundamental rights itself. And we see, unfortunately, a decline when it comes to democracy, rule of law, and fundamental rights in Europe, especially in some countries, as you most probably heard, the situation in Hungary and Poland. This is a struggle that we are taking constantly. We have been taking it for years, but now during the COVID-19, we have seen how the situation has even escalated more, and the struggle have actually continued and become even more important to conduct. And I do believe that, I mean, coming back to the international part, I do believe that there is a vacuum right now where the US across the Atlantic, who has basically given up their role on the leadership for these fundamental values, but also when it comes to other topics, as for example, climate change and so on. It's topics that we really need to work across the borders in order to be able to find a solution. Europe, we can do a lot within Europe, and we can take leadership, but we can not do it ourselves. So taking a leadership in the sense of also bringing other countries and continents on board is very much important. But it is unfortunate that the US have unfortunately taking quite a lot of step backs, but not only that, they are also, with the Trump administration, questioning the whole multilateral cooperation that have led to less wars and conflicts. And some people might say, well, how do we know that it has led to less wars and so on? And of course, we cannot compare it to something that we don't know, but we can just calculate how the situation would have been if, for example, take European Union, for example, we could take a historical throwback in how it was before, and then try to figure out why, for example, we haven't seen as many wars and conflict within our regions as we saw before the formation of the European Union as one important multilateral institution. But with this questioning of these cooperations, I think it's a very dangerous path to take. So either the European Union can say, hey, look, we see how the situation is. Unfortunately, one of our strongest allies have left or trying to slowly leave the boat. And say, well, we will then take leadership, or we will let others take leadership. And others is China and Russia, for example. And personally, I would not want to see China and Russia being the ones leading globally on the topics that I mentioned when it comes to fundamental rights, when it comes to climate change, etc. When looking at what kind of policies the leaders, I would say, of those two countries are currently promoting and are currently promoting. So I think there is a vacuum right now of leadership, which is important that the European Union fills. Otherwise, the alternative I would not like to see. But that also, of course, requires deeper cooperation on some extent. And this is a justified discussion that we need to have in the European Union. What areas do we need deeper cooperation? What areas don't we need deeper cooperations? So I think right now we are in some kind of a momentum where we need to together decide on what direction we are taking, because multilateralism and cooperation, international cooperation and solidarity has never been, for a long time, not been as important as it is right now. I think I will stay here, so if, then we can maybe have a more interactive discussion if you have questions or inputs. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Evin, for the speech and also the work you do inside the European Parliament with other colleagues like Brando on issues that are not only generational and on the hands of a new generation of leaders, but also for being always here for activists and the world that moves around the institution and politics. Because for us and for me too, it's you are an inspirational figure, and I became close to international activities and organization also because I found many strong women that could empower me and empower the role of women inside our organization. I think between the issues we face around the member organization of YES and USY, feminism, maybe it's something that it's very different in every organization, in every country. And I think GD has a lot of work to do on that. And I hope this work will be done in the future, and I'm sure that USY and YES involvement and your institutional representation will be helpful about that. We had do you want to add something about that, Evin?
Yes, I just wanted to say, first of all, those who are inspiration is actually you guys. It's important. I think it's very much important. It's very good that you have this kind of discussions to both, of course, include the membership of your own organization, but also make it broaden and let other people who to follow the discussions, to have this, as young people, to take leadership on these topics are very much important. And then just one very small thing on the feminist issue. I think it's very good that you're also emphasizing feminism. I mean, my own government, as you most probably know, we have been promoting for many years now, or for some years now, the feminist foreign policy as one big important part of the work that we are doing globally, because we know that empowering women and girls are also leading to take whole families out of poverty. So it is a matter of power, of course, that all people should, regardless of gender, should be able to fulfill our dreams and not be discriminated because of our gender, or because of our race, or because of our sexuality, also for that sake. But nevertheless, I salute you guys for the work that you guys are doing. So thank you very much to you.
Thank you so much. Also for putting in the discussion issues like rule of law, democracy. We discussed it today too, about changes we have and we are observing in our democracies. And when a task force from the government to fight fake news, when a limitation of freedom is established, not only in country at risk, but also in our countries, is something to follow and to be close to see what happens. And our movements have the responsibility to follow that, and we observed it with also the contribution of the GD from Bergamo, Lombardia, that is one of the regions in the world that are most affected from coronavirus. And we observed it from the southern region of Italy. We discussed about the digital divide and the difference of rights and inequalities that emerge during the crisis more and more strong. So I think your work on that is very important. Also, Brando is following the activities for the fund against the poverty of people. I don't know how to translate it better than that. And so your work is really important. And I saw some months ago your visit in Turkey with some Italian leaders to discover the situation. And I think this is another big issue on what we should do in the world and how we should act to make sure that also at the board of Europe, everything is okay with the rights of people, with the human rights of people. So I really want to thank you. We had a really long discussion. I want to thank IUSY with Anna Perslava, our Secretary General. Many VPs of IUSY and of YES took part to the discussion. I didn't introduce you, Rodrigo, before he talked, but he's a very excellent colleague of mine in IUSY board. He is the one who promotes the global campaign Decent Work for Youth. That's something that inspires us to act inside our local institution, but also national and international one. And I'm really happy to see every year and every time we try that we can be close to other member organizations of the Young European Socialists and the International Union of Socialist Youth. And thank you to really all the GD Federation that contributed. I mentioned some of them before. I'd like to mention also the GD from Marche, from Ancona, with Eric Giambuzzi I saw in the call, and really many other. I want to thank also Alberto and Giulia for moderating the discussion. It was very nice to have you. I would like to thank also Ludovico for introducing our South American comrades, and really thank you so much for joining us. We are very happy to conclude the discussion with your speech and your participation.
Thank you, Caterina. It was a great event.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.